Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Xaereth Prevails, Grand Arena Story. Today is another really awesome day because we're talking about Grand Arena and I happen to be in the finals. This is the halfway point, the midway point of our current Grand Arena Championships, and I'm really excited because this episode my opponent actually attacks back. Last two opponents, one of them actually set defense, the other one did not, and the one that did set defense didn't actually attack because they apparently have a rule for themselves that if their opponent scores more than 1900 points, then they just don't attack, just so that they can save some time. So anyways, my opponent this time did attack. If you look at the stats a little bit, you can see that my opponent had more relics than I did. I had more tier 7, they didn't have any tier 7, but otherwise they have more levels than I do, and that really kind of inflates your maximum GP. It kind of makes it so that you're going to face people with more Zetas and more gear, which is what happened. My opponent had very similar mods, but and gear, but I had a significant advantage in Zetas. And looking at the other stats, you can see that my opponent had a pretty high degree of skill. They had nearly as many offensive wins as I have, more defensive wins, and we have very similar total banners. And so I knew that this was going to be a pretty good fight. I was excited. It's the finals. What's not to love?
Are you ready for a war?
So coming into this match, my opponent had already cleared my front zone, for front two zones, I should say. And well, let's look at those real quick. So they tripped up on my Emperor Palpatine team, which is always great news. I've been trying bounty hunters at the front lately. This is my first time someone's attacked since I've restarted my defense, so I don't really know. And then they had no trouble clearing the Nute and Qi'ra squads, though. I do know that the Nest squad took 8 banners from my opponent. I was paying attention for that. As to their own zones, they have Palpatine on defense as well, along with Nightsisters, Grievous with Watt, which was new for me, and a Nute squad with some more Nightsisters. It took a little bit of scheming to finally figure out what I wanted to do here, and my opponent had stuck their high-end Nightsisters into 2 different squads, and that kind of negates any specific Nightsisters counters that I have. So I decided that they had a pretty strong other Nightsisters squad here with Talzin and Spirit and Baze for some reason, and there wasn't really anything that scary. However, for my troopers, my troopers are all pretty quick, and as you can see, like we just kind of took out the team, and in hindsight, like, it was almost overkill because none of the Nightsisters there really had any revive mechanics other than Talzin's mass assist attack, and that was pretty easily avoided. So maybe I could have used a smaller team, a worse team, but troopers getting a quick 60 banner win is really not going to be something to complain about, especially when you don't know what other teams you're going to face. Now, I was considering running troopers against this Emperor Palpatine team, but I decided I remembered that Jedi Training Rey is also really good at messing with Empire, and my opponent didn't have the Vader unique Zeta on him, and so I was able to kind of reduce Vader's impact a little bit just by putting days on him, by reducing turn meter and all of that. And what I'm trying to do here with Rey is I'm just trying to use her team to be able to control the situation, and trying to stun people, trying to reduce turn meter, trying to reduce the amount of damage that my own characters are taking, because I need to regenerate all of that before we get to the final portion of the match. And the Empire is pretty squishy, so you kind of sprint toward the end of the match sometimes. So I'm just trying to get to the point where I'm able to, get at least most of my banners and still just kind of control the situation. My priority was absolutely to take down Palpatine first, because Palpatine was going to really give me problems if he got a few stuns off. You know, especially if he managed to stun Jedi Training Rey and Finn, that would really have been bad for me. And so, you know, you want to take him out. Death Trooper is also a good target to take out, but I mean, all of them really are. They all have AoEs. They all mess with your team to certain degrees, and I was not trying to rhyme there. So I hope you enjoyed that little bonus. Anyways, I was able to get 59 banners here, and that was pretty good, considering you very rarely see Emperor Palpatine on defense. I know that I put mine on defense. Other people are starting to do that here and there that I know, but I have to wonder how much of that is just due to me. I'm always telling people that you don't need Emperor Palpatine on offense, which I'm frankly not sure that I should be confident in that. Anyways, the bag zone was a Jango squad and a clone squad, which are both teams that are very manageable for the roster that I have, especially because I was able to clear this leather zone. So, you know, I haven't used any really strong teams yet. And that's about to change here with this Grievous Watt squad. And I tried to get a little cute here. You know, Watt did not have many hit points at all. My opponent hadn't built him for that. And so I took Revan as the lead because I wanted to use Revan's battle tactics ability to be able to just snipe Watt right off the bat without actually using his ability to mark someone else. So the goal is to be able to mark B2 right away and be able to get rid of Watt. And there's absolutely some mixed results here, as you'll see. You know, Watt is able to get his bonus turn off, of course, at the start of the match, and so we put his unshakable taunt or undispellable taunt on Magna Guard, and so he did that, and then I've been waiting this whole time for Revan to take a turn and be able to mark B2, and it took a really long time, so I'm not really sure. I'm going to have to look at the turn meter mechanics and just see what was going on there, because it seemed like I took longer than I probably should have, but I mean, maybe I'm just being entitled here, I don't know. At any rate, one drawback to taking Jedi Revan as the leader is you really run out of health really fast. Normally I want to take Bastila as my lead just because I have a huge starting protection base, but if I take her as the lead, I don't also have the ability to use Jedi Revan's battle tactics ability, and so I wanted to take him. I think that in the end, if you want to take Jedi Revan, I think that works. I mean, I know some people who do take him, and I really like how he gives extra offense to the squad. It's a useful ability to have his leadership. Like, his leadership is better in a lot of ways than Bastila's. You know, she just provides the tenacity and the extra protection, which is nice. But in the end, I need to add some relic levels to this team. I believe that's probably what my biggest factor here. One thing I will share is, you know, a lot of these Grievous teams, people are taking Grievous to Relic 7 really quickly, and I don't necessarily agree with that choice. I think that he doesn't really scale that well with relics. Like, the only relevant stat that he's really gaining is his health, and so I kind of think that it's better to be focusing on other characters. That's why my Grievous is only Relic 1. I'll eventually get him to 7, but nonetheless, people are taking Grievous to Gear 7, or Relic 7 a lot, and he's the main damage dealer. Like, he's the one who does the most damage by far, and I think that, you know, that's kind of just an interesting situation, because in a lot of ways droid teams are maxed out on damage right now, like early on, and so if we can scale up our Jedi teams a little bit, then we can probably be able to counter them. At any rate, you can see that Jolie got the hit. If he needed one more turn to be able to revive everyone, and if Grievous had chosen Grandmaster Yoda or Bastila, that would have been amazing. As it stands, though, he chose Jolee to destroy, and with that came like a really close situation where it's like one more hit from Grievous on either of these guys, and I was toast. But like, he was so close to being destroyed, and then he killed Yoda, and and then he killed Bastila, so I lost that one. Really unfortunate.
All right, we call it a draw.
So one factor that I wanted to mention here was that my opponent had a faster Darth Revan and Bastila. So I was worried that they had put that squad in the very back, and that was a really huge factor because I didn't necessarily have a team that could beat that. I had a Padme team with a Relic 7 Anakin, which could maybe do that, in a pinch on one hit, but I was thinking I was probably going to just need to use my Jawa Gambit thing, where I just sacrifice my squad of Jawas to reduce all their cooldowns, and once I do that to the Jedi Revan team, like it's easy enough to beat them because all their cooldowns are reduced, and my Darth Revan team would be able to get a bunch of turns in before they just got alpha struck to hell. So I was thinking I was going to have to do that, so I was being real cautious here. The General Grievous squad in the front zone is a really great move for that, just because my opponent created that level of uncertainty for me. And I should mention here, like, you guys saw just now that my Phoenix were able to finish off General Grievous, and that is absolutely an option. There's a lot of different kind of B or C level squads that can finish Grievous off pretty well. Rogue One does a great job, and Ewoks also take down a lone Grievous pretty well. So I decided that after looking at all the different rosters and everything, I decided that regardless of what was in the very back zone, I would have enough teams to be able to take down whatever was in the back there and still use my Traya squad. So I wasn't really looking forward to this match. This is a really interesting team, actually. You have this weird hybrid of Nightsisters plus Separatists, and Asajj kind of like meets them in the middle a little bit, being able to get all the Separatists bonuses and then also synergize really well with the Nightsisters. So I actually think that this is a really clever move. I've seen other people post that they've been thinking about this or whatever, and it's something that I'm going to be looking at as well. I doubt that I'm actually going to change my Nightsisters stuff, but as it stands, Nightsisters are starting to be countered so much that I'm not really sure that I want to take them as a full squad anymore anyways. Like, this is a pretty clever way to get around their inherent weaknesses by being able to like spread them out, take two different Nightsisters squads, and just make them a huge pain. And that's what my opponent is doing here, so kudos to them, absolutely. So the goal here was just to kind of bide my time, do some damage as I could, and eventually be able to get an Annihilate off on Daka, which I finally accomplished. You put Isolate on Zombie and then just don't touch her, because if you take Zombie out after she has Isolate, she respawns anyways, and she is suddenly able to taunt again because the Isolate goes away, because it's technically another zombie that is there. So I was, you want to just kind of keep her alive for a while, and then once you take Daka out with Annihilate, then they don't really have any revive mechanics, and you're able to just kind of take out the characters one at a time. Probably better to just leave Zombie where she's at, and if I can get another Annihilate in on Asajj, then that would be great, because then Zombie again would not kill herself, sacrifice herself for Asajj. Anyways, one thing I did want to mention as well was I see a lot of people facing Nute with his extortion ability. They just kind of ignore the extortion and they let it cycle around, and then whenever he gets his other special, he's doing a huge amount of damage to everyone. And I don't know, is it worth missing a full turn to pay him off and to buff that team? I'm not entirely sure, but I have been doing that, and it's worked out pretty well for me. I see a lot of people ignoring it, and then Nute has a couple like transcendent turns and just completely destroys your opponent. So I think on a Traya team especially, it's worth doing, because Traya, a lot of it is just waiting for Annihilate. And if you can just wait till that Annihilate gets there, that's going to probably pan out in your favor anyways, so you may as well just let them have their extortion. Looking at my opponent's backline, it was apparent that I was going to be able to hopefully full clear them without any more fails. I wasn't entirely sure, but there was absolutely some RNG in play, but I decided that I needed to kind of chart it out and figure out exactly what counters I wanted to use, because at this point my opponent had full cleared me and they hadn't failed anymore. They had dropped a few more points, but I was at the point where if I failed any attacks at all, then I would lose the match. But if I was able to full clear, even somewhat inefficiently, I would be able to take the win. And with being able to use my Revan squad to be able to undersize one of these teams, I was going to probably be able to do this. That being said, I wanted to use all my teams to the best effect, and KRU is absolutely always my go-to squad to be able to beat Qi'ra. So that was kind of my first one that canceled each other out, because that was kind of the only team that KRU and First Order were going to actually be able to counter anyways. Then it was the debate between what I wanted to use Commander Luke for and how I was going to beat the Geonosians. My Darth Revan team could beat the Geonosians, and so could my Commander Luke. Commander Luke is also pretty good against clones, but I decided that that match was a little bit more RNG related than just using clones to beat my opponent's Geonosians, or using CLS to beat Geonosians, and so that's what I ended up choosing, was Commander Luke into Geonosians, because that's a relatively easy match. And then using Darth Revan to undersize against clones, and then Padme could clean up on the Jango squad. And so that was what I decided to try to enact, and I guess we can see if I was able to pull it off. The first thing you always want to do is you want to play the most uncertain match first, and none of these matches were necessarily super uncertain, and you could argue that the CLS versus Geonosians was going to be more uncertain than this First Order Nest potential fiasco, but I've done this match a lot of times. I've never actually played against a Qi'ra team with Canderous in it, so that was pretty interesting actually. I love that. And my opponent's nest was actually kind of fast. Like, I'm not used to seeing a fast nest, but that's what happened this time, so kind of cool. And I think that fast nest is actually pretty dangerous as well, so just something to think about. Now you'll notice that I stunned L3 at the start, and that's just to kind of prevent her from doing all her random shenanigans. You don't want her to taunt. She's the only taunter in the area. But then you can't do an AoE on anyone. If you do an AoE and it hits L3, which she's stunned, so it's going to, if you do it and it hits her, then she's going to dispel something on one of your opponent's other characters, and so you want to make sure that while she's stunned, you're not actually doing damage to her at all, because she'll just dispel herself, she'll dispel everyone else, and then you're back to square one. When she actually isn't stunned and she has her taunt, then you can do things like I just did, where I just used my AoE to be able to fuel that turn meter train. And here you can kind of just see I'm taking out these characters one at a time in order of precedence and danger. L3 is just frustrating to work around, but she doesn't really pose much threat if you kind of know what you're doing. You want to take out Vendor first, because Vendor Chewbacca will be able to revive other characters pretty consistently. And then I took out Canderous, because all of his AoE shenanigans, and he can do some pretty decent damage actually. And now we're to the point where I'm trying to take out Nest, but I'm also trying to maximize banners, because you just don't know how far south or sideways a match can be. It can go in the other matches, and so if you can get a higher banner amount, that's going to be really powerful. And so, you know, you can see all my first order guys are pretty beat up. Nest's AoEs are pretty good. Canderous was doing some damage. I'm actually a big fan of Canderous on a Qi'ra squad. I'm going to have to look into that more closely, because I really like Canderous. Actually, it would be interesting to add him to my roster. Anyways, I have a bunch of time, and so what you can see here is I'm kind of controlling her turn meter. Like, I have a ton of turn meter shenanigans of my own that feed my own turn meter, but then I also have a couple different abilities to be able to reduce Nest's turn meter as well, so that I can kind of control things until I'm at full protection on most of my guys. And one of those is my first order officer's second special. It reduces turn meter. First order executioner reduces turn meter with his special, and so you can kind of keep Nest going indefinitely. And once you finally climb to the point where all of your protection is regenerated, then you're able to kind of, you know, you can end it when you want to. Then you just revert back to basics. You don't use specials anymore, and then you're able to take her out while she's just permanently stunned. So a quick, easy 59 banners. Maybe I could have gotten up to 60 if I had wanted to take the time, but even though I was just now preaching how I wanted to make sure I had a bunch of banners from, you know, just in case something happened on my other squads and fights, I also wanted to make sure that I had no chance timing out, which is a very real risk with Nest. So jumping straight in with Commander Luke here, I'll just kind of outline the things you want to be doing and looking at. The very first step you want to use to be able to counter Geos with Commander Luke is you want to stun Geo Alpha. After that, you want to apply buff immunity to the Brute, because otherwise he'll just taunt and you'll have to be hitting him. After he has buff immunity on him, then you want to take out Geo's Soldier as quick as you can, because he doesn't have any evade mechanics, he doesn't have a high health pool, and so if you can take one guy out early, that's going to really help. My opponent was able to get a few attacks in with their Geonosians here, and that's obviously not ideal, because you can see poor Captain Han got taken out, but we have plenty more where that came from. We have like 3 other Hans, or 4, I guess, so whatever. But it was actually really good that they didn't like target and destroy Chewbacca. That would have maybe changed things out of my favor. But one thing I did want to mention, once Alpha's gone, he's like, the entire squad is gone and destroyed, and whatever, wonderful. But on top of that, you really want to take C-3PO on that squad. Like, he is the key to being able to beat bugs easily, because he's putting expose on every single basic, and that's huge against Geonosians who are all health pool based. Being able to just do that massive amount of damage is really good, and it's kind of good to be able to scale up as well. And by scale up, I mean even Geonosian squads with a high level of relics are going to struggle against Commander Luke, just because all of those exposes are just pretty nasty against them. Doing percentage health, it just scales really well unless you have a mechanic to prevent that. Using this Darth Revan team with an undersized squad, like, fighting clones is just really, really easy. That's going to change once General Skywalker hits the board, but for right now, it's really not a challenge. I don't think I really need to outline exactly what I did there. I feared everyone, and then I just slowly, as they came out of fear, I just picked them off. So you can rewatch that again if you want, or you can just move on to another whatever matchup. This squad was extremely fast, and you know, it may have actually caused some problems. The Bosk was, you know, he was well over 300 speed, faster than my own Padme, which Padme I think is either 350 305 or 310 speed. So faster than mine, but my opponent didn't have the Zeta on Bosk's taunt, and so I just dispelled it, and then I could hit whoever I wanted. And so here I'm just trying to kind of use all my stacks to their full ability. Courage built up really fast against this team, and they didn't dispel it fast enough, so I was able to, just do a ton of damage really fast, just one-shot most characters, and it was over pretty quick. Apparently they did protection damage to one character before it was all over, so anyways, that was it for my full clear, and it was just enough. My opponent had failed once against my Emperor Palpatine team. I had failed once against their General Grievous team with Watt, which is something I'm really going to have to look at pretty soon. That's a really scary team, and a lot of people are having problems with it. But let's look at my defenses real quick. So I've had a few people tell me that they like that I show my defenses, so I've changed them around just a tiny bit, and I wanted to show you guys. I had one extra defense with Palpatine, awesome. My opponent said that they used some kind of droid team against it and had to gamble, so love that. I had put my Jango squad actually up front as well, just to be able to try to contribute to my overall goal, which I'll describe in just a minute here. In the back top zone, I had my Nightsisters with Grievous, and that's just kind of to trap my opponents into hopefully having overcommitted with their other squads, and maybe make them gamble on the front zones, so that when they get to the back, maybe they've used one of their meta teams or something like that. I know that's panned out a little bit here and there. The bottom front zone has my Qi'ra team, which I really need to work on. I need to do something a little bit differently. It's not doing enough right now. And then I have my Nute and Nest with Watt team. This is the first time I've actually seen someone do something reasonable against it, rather than just like throwing Revan at it or throwing Traya at it. I don't know what my opponent used to counter it, but I did take out 7 banners this time, or 8, so that's absolutely worth it in my opinion. Being able to take 8 banners out, that's more than it's almost half of an actual defensive win, so that's pretty good. And then finally, my back zone here, I have the Shaak T clones, which is probably going to change now that I have General Skywalker unlocked. And then I have my Geonosians, and so I had mentioned that I have an overall strategy here, and I don't really know if I'm going to keep up with this specific setup, but the goal is to kind of just force your opponent to use Traya everywhere, and just like Traya use overload. And I realize that there are plausible counters to all of the teams that I've listed here that aren't Traya, but a lot of players will kind of revert to Traya as their crutch, and so they'll see that Nest team and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to use Traya there because that's going to be an annoying fight. Nest a lot of times people out a lot of times, or at Relic 7, like Nest is pretty scary, which mine is 7, so there's a lot of factors that go into that, but the whole goal is then when they get back to the back zone, I have a Geonosian squad, and a lot of people kind of panic when they see a Geonosian squad when they don't have Traya. I have been on the receiving end of countless DMs and messages saying like, hey, I don't have Traya and I have to beat Geonosians. Like, what can I do? How can I beat them? And a lot of times people don't have the right tools for that, and so that's kind of my goal here. My opponent did say that they thought that my front zone was a little too weak, and that they would advise me to put something stronger up front. So I don't know. I agree to some extent, but I also will argue that my opponent did. It did force my opponent to kind of overextend with their against my Palpatine team and use a team that wasn't a perfect counter, and it got me a defensive win, which ultimately helped me win the entire match. And so I don't know, we'll see. I really only had one match to be able to test this theory anyways, this defensive strategy, so maybe next time I'll be able to do that. General Anakin's going to change things though as well, so we'll see how that goes. So the last thing I wanted to look at was I brought this out a few episodes ago, and sloppiness isn't really condemnation of my opponent here, I promise. You know, it's just trying to gauge how sloppy both of us were, how efficient we were with banners, based off of just our overall attacks, because we both full cleared each other, which means that we probably both had the teams to be able to win on the first try, or I mean, in my case, I guess I didn't really, but it's just an interesting thing to look at. Even if you isolate all of the losses that you have, all the failed attacks, if you isolate that, you can see how banners efficient you are. And in my case, like, I failed one of my attacks, and that's not great, but then combined on all of my other fights, actually including the cleanup for the General Grievous squad, I only dropped 6 banners total. So, you know, I feel okay about that. Of course, you never want to fail, so not trying to say that it's okay or whatever, but you know, and my opponent got 22. That's pretty decent as well. It's just good feedback for my own defenses, which, you know, my opponent had a pretty high degree of skill, and they clearly knew what they were doing. They were during our chats, they definitely had a pretty strong understanding of the matchup and how to counter different things. And so the fact that I was able to steal 22 banners against my opponent is something that, I don't know, it's something that I guess I feel a little bit proud about. You know, maybe not prideful, but I'm happy. My defense is coming along. So anyways, folks, let's move on to the end here. With this win, I was able to move all the way up to 6-0, which is a great position to be in. You need to win 10 matches to be able to get into Qi'ra, as long as you're full clearing most of your matches and getting most of the feats. And so if I can win 4 of the next 6, that's great. Like, there's way less pressure for me. I'm really excited about that. I also got enough Zetas to be able to put another one on some character before Grand Arena starts the next round. So anyways, guys, stay tuned for the next round, and thank you so much for watching, and remember that in all things, Xaereth prevails.